ओम नमः श्री यतिराजाय विवेकानंद सूरये सच्चित् सुख स्वरूपाय स्वामिने तापहारिणे. So all of you can hear me. So we were discussing verse number sutra number 30. So I'll just read it out again. Vyadhi sthana sanshaya pramada alasya virati भ्रांति दर्शन अलब्धो भूमिका त्वात् and अनवस्थित त्वात् अवस्थितत्वानि चित्त विक्षेप अंतरायाः विक्षेपास्ते अंतरायाः. Antarayam, the whole meaning is disease, that is sickness, any kind of sickness, physical or mental laziness, that is sthana. Vyadhi means sickness, mental laziness, that is sthana. Sanshaya, doubt, lack of enthusiasm. Pramada, alasya is sloth or laziness, lethargy. Lack of enthusiasm and lethargy are slightly different. And so we see here Swamiji is discussing all these things, that Vyadhis, not Swamiji, it's Patanjali Sutra, Swamiji is discussing in detail what will Vyadhi, how does it obstruct distractions, and how do they act as distractions. They are obstructing distractions, they obstruct. So antarayaha, they antarayaha means plural. Antaraya means they are the obstructions which we normally face when we try to practice yoga. So we begin with disease. This body is to be taken care of. In one Ayurveda, Charak Samhita and all, they say that though our scriptures depend more on the sukshma than the sthula. Sthula means the gross. Gross is not given as much importance, but as a vehicle of the sukshma, till it lasts, it should be taken care of. One should not be inordinately attached to the body, but that doesn't mean that the body should not be taken care of. It should be in good shape. It should not be indulged, overindulged by excess food or excess fad for fitness. That is why they say in asana, when you try to do asana, do only that much which you can continue throughout your life. Simple asanas. That keeps your body fit and also does not allow you to uh, allow the mind and the other aspects of our personality to become weak. So it acts as a vehicle. This is the boat. You can do sadhana. It carries us to the other shore of the ocean of life. So it must be taken care of. Unhealthy people cannot be yogis. So that is the general idea which is normally understood. I mean, the fitness of the body is only used, fitness of the body is only necessary to take care of our sadhana. Beyond that, it is a fad which should be avoided. Unhealthy persons, of course, cannot be yogis, but that doesn't mean that health should be the primary goal of one's life. If one is inordinately attached to the body, to health, and takes it as a full-time profession, practicing yoga, practicing fitness at the cost of mental development, then the development will be lopsided. The right use of the boat is just to carry us to the other shore. There are other functions which are required. You need to row the boat. You need pranamaya kosha to run the body. You need manomaya kosha, a healthy mind, to keep the body in good shape and to improve your personality. So all these things are done through the medium of the body. So the boat is important as long as it carries all the other things which are necessary to cross. But otherwise, other than crossing a person, a yogi, taking him to the other shore, making him reach the goal of life, that is freedom, it should not be pampered. That's all. But you should take enough care. So that's why disease is mentioned in the first, because if you have a disease, either self-caused or because of some other reason, or if we don't take precautions, if we overeat, if there are many things which are responsible for bad health, that leads to disease, and that leads to obstructing distractions in the name of yoga. Antarayaha. Chitta vikshepa te antarayaha. Chitta, when, so these are the obstructing distractions. They cause chitta vikshepa, means the scattering of the mind. The mental energy is scattered. It is not focused on a particular object. So concentration, dhyana, dharana and samadhi, they are out of question for a wavering mind. So that is why, to avoid chitta vikshepa, there are many reasons. The first one, as I said, is vyadhi, that is disease. Then comes mental laziness. Now this may not be because of any disease. The body may be very healthy, but at the same time, the mind, some people develop a kind of mental fatigue. They want everything very easy. Even when they come to spirituality, they want somebody to spoon feed them or just assure them that you don't have to do anything. That was perhaps what Girish Ghosh felt. He said he doesn't have to do anything, no sadhana. But then, of course, he had a very strong willpower and he had no sanshaya, the third one. Third one is dhyana and sanshaya. So if you don't have doubt, then it's okay. But mental laziness, not taking efforts to repeat the name of the Lord or to take care of your sadhana or to understand the difficult, apparently difficult concepts. They are not very difficult, but mental laziness prevents you from trying anything higher. You just want to maintain a status quo in life and say it's going on smoothly. Till now, I have no trouble. So it's okay if by God's grace everything is going on fine. So that a kind of mental laziness comes. So that is known as dhyana. Opposed to that, there is another which is a negative quality, which is samshaya. In Gita also, Bhagavan Shri Krishna says, samshayatma vinashyati. A man who keeps on doubting whether he is doing the right thing, he doubts the wisdom of his guru, the wisdom of the wise masters, he doubts the scriptures. So for a person who has doubt, then this obstructing distractions, chitta vikshepa, are very common. Then pramada. Now pramada, sthana is mental laziness. Pramada is in general, it is a combination of physical as well as mental enthusiasm. The mind is not energetic, it is more of prana than the manas. Sthana is a mental quality. It's a mental laziness, which is because one has not been trained to think logically, to think systematically. So the mind is lazy to uh, think in a proper sequence and try to understand. So the mind wants ready-made solutions. It doesn't want to take the trouble of analyzing a particular thing. That is dhyana. Whereas pramada is not necessarily, person may be highly intelligent, but he can lack enthusiasm. So that is because of the prana. The prana shakti may be a bit weak. Body is fit, mind is fit, but somehow the prana results in lack of enthusiasm. So pramada and alasya, lethargy, is more of a physical tiredness, though the prana is involved, but various proportions make you can make this distinction. One is lack of enthusiasm, which is mental, physical as well as physical. Lethargy can be purely physical. It is because of tiredness or lack of nutrition and many things. Then alasya, avirati, that is clinging to sense enjoyments. So and then bhranti darshana, false perception. Clinging to sense enjoyments, of course, is harmful because a part of the mind The prana and the Annamaya Sharira, they are involved. When you cling to sense enjoyments, when you actually, the sense organs are in full flow and you are indulging in sense enjoyments, that much of energy is lost. So it is pure mathematics that if you waste your energy in clinging to sense enjoyments and you spend half of your time satisfying that, then you have very little mental energy left for concentration, for higher japa and other things, for spiritual sadhana. Now, clinging to sense enjoyments is avirati. And then bhranti darshana. Bhranti darshana means false perception. So you perceive, unnecessarily perceive something which it is not. It may mean something, it may be something, and you may understand it as something else. Suppose there is a person is coming to you. His intentions are very, uh, I mean, not at all doubtful. But because of your Bhranti Darshana, false perception, you imagine that person is coming with malified intention. And then you behave and then you react in such a way, though he might have come with absolutely pure intentions, but our doubt or our false perception of a person or a thing or an object, that it will give us happiness, it will give us wisdom. If that there is a false perception and you see a thing, particular thing, as as that which it is not, so that is a false perception. So that can lead to error, and that is also an obstructing distraction. So you have a false perception. You perhaps have some perceptions which are not at all important for your spiritual life. Some people have some hallucination, and they always are on the lookout for these false perceptions, these perceptions, but they have nothing to do with spiritual progress. So they give up japa and go after those perceptions and different false perceptions. So that is known as Bhranti Darshana. Darshana means experience. Bhranti means false. So false experience, not just perception, but false experiences. So how to know whether it is false or true? Because if it is a true experience, then there won't be doubt, there won't be vyadi, there won't be sthana, there won't be pramada, there won't be mental laziness, doubt, lack of enthusiasm. If these things come, then you have to understand that your perception is wrong. If you have perceived something, if the vision is real, then it increases the enthusiasm, it increases, removes all doubt, you develop a conviction because of that experience. So then the perception is whether it is a natural perception or a supernatural perception, like a vision. If it is strengthening, if it is positive, if all these other qualities, that's why Patanjali has mentioned these qualities, that if mental laziness, doubt, lack of enthusiasm, lethargy remain even after, and clinging to sense enjoyments, intense desire to enjoy the things of the world, and then we have some visions or some experiences and think that is spiritual progress, then it is wrong. That is a false perception. You have seen something, but that is just an hallucination. So that is the difference, because true vision will result in all these things: disease, mental laziness, doubt, lack of enthusiasm, lethargy, and clinging to sense enjoyments. These will progressively become less. Doubt also will become less, sanshaya or doubt. So you become increasingly convinced of the veracity of spiritual life. So these things, and non-attaining concentration and falling away from the state when obtained. So you have with great difficulty attained a state of concentration, and suddenly you see you fall down, and then again the mind becomes restless. No doubt it will happen, but if it happens often, then these are obstructing distractions. You should be able to, for more or less a fixed amount of time, to be in a very relaxed state, after attaining concentration. So and you don't fall off from that state and then go to ridiculously low states. So a little lack of concentration is okay. So falling away from the state means falling to the depths. On one side, you get wonderful concentration, and after the meditation session is over, you intensely become either lazy, then you become full of doubts, and you lose all enthusiasm and go after sense enjoyments. That means something is wrong with the concentration. So you are falling away from the high state which you had attained through your strenuous efforts of yoga. So falling away from the state when you have obtained by Guru's grace or by God's grace, when you reach a particular state and then suddenly give it up and then go down to the bottom, then something is wrong. A little obstruction is okay, obstructing distraction is okay, but falling away to to lower depths, very low state, where all this mental laziness, lack of enthusiasm, doubt, and other things are prevailing, after having attained to a particular high state of concentration, these are the dangerous obstructing distractions in spiritual life. So mental laziness, as I said, makes us lose all lively interest. We might have developed some interest and some enthusiasm for spiritual practice, but suddenly you see that there is no will or energy to practice. So that is partly due to physical laziness, or but then mostly it is because of mental laziness. Doubts will rise even if you are intellectually convinced, until certain psychic experiences, real psychic experiences, are attained. And that is a very common problem, that one reads so many books and has so many intellectual convictions, but somehow they are not enough. Even the most intellectual of persons doubts his own reasoning. He said, I might have reasoned it correct, but it might not be true. Are these things true? So to support it, you should have positive and strengthening psychic visions. So these are visions, they are not hallucinations, they are higher visions, higher convictions, after having which you suddenly, it clears all the doubts in the mind. That is one of the first signs of uh, a person having a real psychic experience. So immediately after that experience, he feels convinced of the presence of God in his life, and the the efficacy of the sadhana is doing, and the result of the sadhana, which is some kind of experience, maybe a vision of the deity on whom he is meditating, or some wonderful ideas which keep on coming up like a fountain from the depths of the heart when you are meditating. So you may have a feeling, a wonderful feeling of the presence of the Lord, or a vision of the Lord. It can come in several forms, but the main uh, the, the main check, or the main factor that determines the authenticity of such experiences, such strange psychic experiences, is that once doubt goes away, one gains in mental laziness goes away, lethargy goes away, one becomes up and doing, and the most important is one does not feel like clinging to sense enjoyments anymore. They decrease in proportion to the power of the vision that one has. Some psychic experience have the power to suddenly show to you that it is just a waste of energy to indulge in sense pleasures. So these are the tests of psychic experiences, if to just to know whether they are genuine or not. Acha, for falling away when you have attained to a particular state, Swamiji says, sometimes, some days, or some even for a few weeks, the mind becomes very calm and easily concentrated, and you'll suddenly find that you're making a lot of progress, and you find a lot of joy. But sometimes it may happen that suddenly you feel that all the progress has stopped and you have got stuck somewhere. So Swamiji says at that time you have to persevere, not give up. Many people give up. They say, okay, I'm doing so much of sadhana, I'm not making any progress. So the moment it falls, you have to just persevere and slowly raise it back to the level it, to which it had attained. So that is important. One has to persevere and not allow things to, even when there is a fall in enthusiasm, or that state, you no longer reach that particular level easily as you had done maybe a week before. But over a period of time, you will find that stage slowly returning back to you. Then you will find that the next time or the subsequent efforts, when you do, the fall will not be so much. You will be able to retain the mind at a pretty high level, may not be the highest level, but at a pretty high level, even if it falls down. It won't falls down, it will not fall down to the depths of despondency. That will never happen, because the mind has become steady. Now the next verse is dukkha. Let me see what is the next verse. That is verse number 31. So coming to verse number 31. Dukkha daurmanasyang श्वास प्रश्वास विक्षेप अनुभव. So what does it mean? Vikshepa sahabhuva, vikshepa ahabhuva. So grief, dukkha, grief, mental distress, tremor of the body, irregular breathing. Now these are yes, grief, dukkha means grief, sudden grief. Something happens and you go to the depths of grief. You become despondent. So this dukkha, these are the different qualities. So Swamiji says this grief, mental distress, daurmanasya, that is mental distress, some kind of distress, sudden distress comes. Grief is there, but suddenly you feel distressed, and that is accompanied by tremor, syanga mejayatva. That means daurmanasya anga mejayatva, that is tremor of the body. So suddenly you feel that the body starts, the hand starts shaking. If one is doing real spiritual practice, as one does yoga, sometimes in the midst of steadiness, maybe your hand shakes, some kind of tremors come. That is typical of a higher state. When you go to higher state and then come down, you might experience these things, but it may not be common for all. This tremor of the body. Irregular breathing happens. When you do japa or do sadhana regularly, the pranayama happens automatically. But because of sudden obstructions or sudden distractions, mental distractions, shwasa prashwasa vikshepa. So shwasa prashwasa means irregular breathing. Irregularly you will breathe in, irregularly you will breathe out. It will not be uniform. So one of the typical signs of lack of progress or some obstruction in yogic practice is your breathing starts becoming irregular. That means you lose your composure, and irregular breathing begins, and that is accompanied by the tremor of the body. That accompany non-retention of concentration. So one of the main reasons is that when you attain to a level of concentration and then you suddenly fall down and start becoming restless, then grief, mental distress, tremor of the body, and irregular breathing. These are the 5 major signs which Patanjali has discovered. If you have any one of these 5 signs, after having attained a level of concentration and had some wonderful experience, these things can be the result of non-retention of concentration. Concentration was there, but if we cannot sustain it for a long period of time, then these things happen. So Swamiji says concentration will definitely bring perfect repose to the mind and body when you are practicing it. When we are concentrating, it brings perfect rest to the mind and body. You get a perfect rest. Even sleep will not give you such wonderful rest as much as meditation does, because in sleep, part of our sleep, or mostly the sleep is disturbed by dreams and nightmares. If you see, if you sleep for about 6 hours or 8 hours a day, the real sleep, the deep sleep, will be very less. The rest of the time there will be some kind of uh, dreaming, or maybe nightmares, which will result in disturbed sleep, and that disturbed sleep is not worth it. If it is totally deep sleep, then it's okay. Even if you can sleep if there is deep sleep for an hour or so, you get refreshed. But otherwise, when the concentration is there, when concentration is practiced, you get better rest, physical rest also, because there is no dream, there is no restlessness in the mind, because there is no dream. It is much better, of a much better quality than sleep. Of course, deep sleep is better, but meditation is slightly better because it's not an unconscious process. Deep sleep is an unconscious process, whereas meditation is a conscious process. Consciously, we are trying to reduce the number of waves of the mind, chitta vritti. The lesser the waves, the more peace you find, and you get perfect rest for the mind and the body. So you don't require much sleep. So that's why those who can meditate, they can manage with the less hours of sleep. It is perfectly normal to find yogis. Thakur himself slept very less, 4 or 3 hours. Swami Vivekananda used to sleep. But even in that, he used to get wonderful rest, because most of the time when he was awake, he used to meditate. And such high levels of concentration brings perfect repose, perfect rest to the mind and body every time it is practiced. But, and then repetition of the Om, as it was said, Tasya Vachaka Pranava. So repetition of the Om, Pranava, and self-surrender to the Lord will strengthen the mind. These are the two ways. Maintaining a concentration level of concentration by constantly repeating the mantra, and self-surrender to the Lord. The ego is the problem which causes desires, and then problems, and then desires are not satisfied, it gets converted into restlessness. So if you surrender to the Lord, then you have a feeling that I do not want things to happen this way or that way. Whatever happens, I'm happy with that. So that helps. That spirit of sharanagati, or self surrender, removes a lot of tension. You don't worry unnecessarily about the future, because you know the Lord is taken care of whatever you need, and He will do it. And if there are some setbacks, then also you take it as God's will, and don't unnecessarily bother your head about that. The more you think of the past, the things which you should have gone right in the past, and the more we think, become anxious of the future, in both the cases, you are actually not depending on the Lord, because you think things should have happened in a different way. So that kind of attitude, not allowing uh, the ego to decide what should happen and what should not happen, and surrendering oneself to the Lord, and repetition of the mantra along with it, it will bring strength, it will bring fresh energy, and also strengthen our mind. So all these problems, grief, mental distress, tremor of the body, irregular breathing, those things will vanish, because the concentration levels will be so high. But even if they occur, these five things, dukkha, daurmanasya, mental distress, and all those things, angame jayatva, that is tremor of the body, irregular vishwasa, prashwasa, vikshepa. So irregular breathing. So all these things will stop. But Swamiji says these nervous shakings will come to almost everyone who really practice it. So one need not be afraid. Do not mind them at all, but keep on practicing. Practice will cure them and make your seat firm. Seat firm means your conviction or your attitude will remain firm, and you will go ahead with the practice in spite of these setbacks. So Swamiji says the setbacks are very normal. Suddenly you start grieving. Suddenly there might be some mental distress, not because of any external incident. That may be the cause, but even if there is no external perceptible external cause, still that mental distress will come as a result of slackening of the sadhana. So you have to persist, and just because it is giving some grief or mental distress or some kind of tremor in the body, one should not stop. Even if the breathing is irregular, slowly the japa will regularize the breathing, stop the tremors in the body, remove all the mental distress and grief, and then that is the benefit of practice. So practice will cure all these five problems and make you fit for a higher life. tat pratisheda tat pratishedartha mekattvabhyasah. To remedy these setbacks, practice of one subject should be made. Now, before this, we will just discuss what are these things, the tremors and other things, how they manifest in our day-to-day life. Vyadi, this we discussed, dukkha daurmanasya anga me jayatva swasa praswasa vikshepa sa anubhava. So, all the distractions that we see here, the five distractions, what is the cause of all this? It will be noticed that nearly all the distractions that are listed here, five, come under a particular quality of Prakriti which is known as tamas. They are tamasic qualities. One has to remember, this is only tamas can drag us down. The more you meditate, the more you become sattvic, and the proportion of sattva increases. But when it decreases, you suddenly come down to a tamasic level, and then all these things manifest. Dukkha daurmanasya anga mejayatva shwasa prashwasa, the trembling of the body, irregular breathing, all these are a result of the predominance or preponderance of tamas in our body or in our nature. It's not just the body, even the mind. So if we give it tamasic food, then definitely there will be distractions, there will be irregular breathing, grief will be there. These are all not caused just by the mind. They are even the body and the prana, if they are not taken care of, it can result in these uh, five problems, distractions. So what to do? First, one should get rid of tamas. Sloth is the greatest enemy. Sloth means a person becomes very despondent. You know, it is the inspirer. It inspires cowardice, doubts, self-pitying grief. There are some people, they constantly love to sort of self-pity. Some kind of self-pitying is very common to them. Every time there is a problem, they will say, oh, this has happened to me. They want some people to hear them out. So whether the person, so that's why some of the counselors quietly listen, because they have to get rid of that. So self-pitying grief, some grief has happened, something has happened, and they go on telling that this has happened, this should not have happened to me, why has this happened? So that kind of self-pity gives them some kind of, they expect that some kind of help will come from outside, which normally doesn't come. These are distractions. That is despondency, the self-pity, and very trivial hair splitting doubts also come. So when a person is despondent, when he is slothy, when he is full of all these distractions, then what happens? That doubts increase. Am I doing, is the mantra really helping me? Is the sadhana really helping me? Is God really, does God really exist? So all these things may happen in one's spiritual life. Sloth may also be a psychological cause of sickness. So if a person is very slothy, very lazy, then that also can not only affect the mind but also the body, and vyadhi may come because of that. So all these things are connected. It is tempting to relax from our duties. It's very tempting. Everybody likes to relax from the duties. and take refuge in ill health and hide under a nice warm blanket when we are sick. It's very easy. Sometimes we do not know whether it is our mental sloth, mental attitude, which gives us a semblance of sickness, and we prefer to do nothing. So that affects the body also. It is a psychological cause of sickness. And we take refuge that, oh, we are not, then we start self-pitying, oh, I have this problem, I have that problem, and try to hide under the guise of sickness. Actually, it says the psychological reason is sloth. The body resists all unaccustomed disciplines. The moment we start sadhana, then we think of just relaxing. Oh, I have done a lot of sadhana today, so let me just go and take some rest, and just so that slowly that sloth will start building up. The tamas will build up, and then irregular breathing, then the trembling of body, and all those things will come. So when a sadhaka in the beginning, when he is unaccustomed to regular japa, because all his life he has never done some sincere spiritual practices, but when he starts it, all sorts of excuses the ego will try to give him. First, it will there will be a hysterical perhaps display of weaknesses. Some people become hysterical. They say, I'm weak, I can't do this, I can't do that, I have this problem, I have that problem. Sometimes people faint. Then some other manifestations are violent headaches. Headache also can be psychological. Too much of thinking makes us feel the headache. If the mind is calm, then all these physiological changes also do not happen. Then palpitations may come, and then you feel that fear psychosis. So many things are happening because our subconscious mind has so many samskaras, evil samskaras or negative samskaras, which cause this resistance in the mind, in our brain. So naturally it affects the physiological process and the symptoms which it produces in the psychophysical system. In the physical system, that is our Annamaya Kosha, they appear to be genuine. So if you check the blood pressure, if you check the breathing pattern, there is really a disturbance. Not that they are pretending to do it, but it is caused by all other list of weaknesses which we had mentioned in the previous verse. That I'll just read that: sickness, mental laziness, lack of enthusiasm, doubt, sloth, craving for sense pleasure, and all those things, false perception. So all these errors and all these problems will cause uh, these headaches, fainting spells, weaknesses, and many things will happen. Hysterical, we can become hysterical, trying to repeat again and again the grief which one is feeling, and so on. But this resistance is not because of the conscious mind. Even in spite of our efforts not to have that kind of feeling, tamasic feeling, it is a subconscious mind which drags us down. So it is no good, Patanjali says, trying to fight them by sheer force, by dragging yourself out of bed and staggering around in fear, in a fever. Suppose we have a fever, just by using our willpower, we cannot just undergo any transformation or overcome it. But we have to attack it at the base level, not allow that tamas to come, not allow that sloth to overcome us. How to do it? By doing japa, which attacks which solves the problem at the root level. By quite persistently doing japam, quietly and persistently doing japam, it slowly removes the sloth. Slowly but unconscious, slowly but consciously, it removes the sloth and all the samskaras at the subconscious level. They will slowly become energetic. There will be more rajas and more sattva, and the tamas will vanish. So, if you see that if we try to persist with the sadhana in spite of all these obstructing distractions, then we'll find that not only the sickness but the doubt will go, and all these things we can solve when the problem is solved at the subconscious level. So the subconscious level is the chitta, the place where our samskaras are being stored. So when you try to handle it, try to do the japa has an intrinsic power which results in removing all these samskaras at the root level. So the feeling of tiredness, mental laziness, and all those things, doubt, these don't come at all in the mind. So when an aspirant enters a spiritual life, he naturally starts with lot of enthusiasm. That we observe that the first steps when you get diksha, or maybe when you start a new spiritual practice, you are very much enthusiastic, and for a few days you do a lot, and then you find lot of peace and delight in what you do. But the complaints start coming only after a few months or a few years, because people are not persistent enough. In the beginning they get a feeling that, oh, this is wonderful sadhana that I'm doing, I'm getting so much of mental peace, I should increase. But a stage will come when suddenly, uh, in the beginning everything seems to be very easy, inspiring, when we are fresh, when we have just begun the sadhana. But we have to realize that there will be setbacks, and right from the start, the mood which we have created, the positive mood, will not last long. But simply by thinking that the euphoria that has been created by starting a new spiritual practice or a new way of life, in the beginning there is euphoria, you find, but true spirituality does not depend on such sudden feelings of pleasure or euphoria. It may be true for the sense pleasures. In sense pleasures, when you enjoy the sense organs, you suddenly feel that you have great joy. But the very next moment, when the senses, the energy of the senses is depleted, you feel depressed. Then you have to rise yourself again. So somehow that energy is lost when you indulge in sense pleasures. So phases of dryness, struggle, doubt, they will come, because we have not been able to sustain our spiritual practices. We have not been able to keep it at a sattvic level. So conscious good feelings, conscious good work, karma yoga, and then conscious doing of japa, they will result in this removal of the stress and strain and the samskaras at the causal level. So that can be done only by spiritual practices. We can't wish them away. We may be growing mostly very strongly, we might be doing japa, but all of a sudden our minds have a tendency to become dull and dark. At that time, one normally gives up hope and then gives up spiritual practices altogether. But we should never listen to these setbacks. As Swamiji says, there is no failure in spiritual life. If we continue to make an effort, we will start from where we had left. That is the advantage. That it's not that you lose, just like in a lottery. In the material world, you are rich today, but on the toss, if you are betting, and the toss of the coin can change your fortunes. But in spiritual life, it doesn't happen. Progress happens gradually, but the fall also will happen gradually, unless our samskaras are so bad that they just drag us down to the level of, to the bottom of depression and tamas. So one should see that the proper balance, sattva, is there between tamas and rajas. So when we have risen to that level, we have to struggle to keep that level going, or keep that level constant. So if we do that, uh, then we will make progress. So the next verse says, tat pratishedhartham ekatvat abhyasa. These troubles or these distractions which were listed earlier can be removed by practice of concentration upon a single truth. That is, what is the single truth? That God alone is real and He alone can help us. He alone is Satchidananda, the eternal existence, eternal consciousness, and eternal bliss. So if I go to the eternal source, then there is a hope that I can raise myself up and reach the level of sattva. So one should have know the truth. Here he says, one has to know the truth of single truth. Ekatva Abhyasa. So Abhyasa, you have to, by practice of concentration on focusing on this truth, which is God. God has many aspects, and so there are innumerable approaches to him. So Patanjali does not specify, he just says truth. That truth can be a personal God, truth can be an impersonal God, truth can be some faith in some being above the clouds, whatever it may be. But still, that approach has to be genuine, and it should be, more importantly, single minded. So Vyavasayatmika Buddhi Ekeha Kurunandana. So make your mind one pointed. That is what Swami Vivek, that is what Sri Krishna is telling Arjuna. He says, I want that Buddhi, Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, that Buddhi which enables you to make the right choice and focus on that choice with single-mindedness. So this different approaches Patanjali will discuss later. How to meditate on truth. What do you mean by truth? How many types of truths are there? This will come in the subsequent sutras. But in Sutra number 32, he says, by holding on, by abhyasa, by continuously practicing concentration on a single concept of truth, a personal God or an impersonal God or a God above the clouds. There are so many conceptions of God, but all of them agree upon one thing, that this whole exercise is done to realize the real truth, the truth that will make you free. So once when but the main point here is one should be single-mindedly after this ideal. Only then all the problems can be removed. So once the aspirant has chosen his ideal, whatever ideal, Ram, Krishna, or any other God, and his way of approaching it, has he chosen whether I'll approach God through Karma Yoga, through Bhakti Yoga, through Jnana Yoga, through Raj Yoga, or a combination of all the different yogas. You can begin the day with Raj Yoga, predominantly do Raj Yoga in the morning, or maybe you can do Karma Yoga after that. And then, of course, you can read certain books whenever there is a fixed time. If you practice Jnana Yoga, think about the questions which arise in our mind and how to solve them, what the great masters have said. So first aspirant should choose and then pray to him. And some people, if you see, are apt to be very Catholic in their attitude to religion. Catholic in the sense, they are ultra liberal. That doesn't mean they should not be. You should remember this. Swami Vivekananda said one should be as broad as the sky, but as deep as the ocean. That is what Sri Ramakrishna stood for. Whatever faith he took up, he went to the depth of its truth. He didn't just float on the surface. He wanted to know everything. But at the same time, if a new idea was presented to him, a new path was presented, he will go after that path with equal determination. So when he wanted to learn Islam, how the Islamic people worship, he caught hold of a guru and worshipped it. So we have to be Catholic as far as our beliefs, and liberal as far as beliefs and faiths are concerned. But that doesn't mean we have to follow every faith. We have to choose one faith, that is known as Ishtanistha. So you choose one particular god or goddess or a deity, and then just pursue it. We have to be Catholic. We have to accept that all gods are true, all paths are true, but we can't possibly practice all paths. Then there is very little time. We should not be trying a little bit of everything and trying to make a hopeless mixture. So that is why Swamiji says here, trying a little of this, nibbling a little here and here, then you are not eating the entire foodstuff. You're taking a small nibble from here, you're nibbling away the whole cake, and the rest of it is just remaining like that. You don't fail to attain the goal because you're nibbling in too many places. God can be followed differently through different paths, different religions, different sects. There is absolutely no doubt about it. But one cannot practice. In Sri Ramakrishna's case, it was different because he attained Siddhi in one path before he took up another path. So he was so hungry, he was like a spiritual glutton. A material glutton wants to eat different dishes. He will boast that I've gone there, I've eaten in this restaurant, I've gone to this country where this item is a specialty. So there are spiritual gluttons who not only eat just to satisfy their hunger, but they eat exotic foods and exotic things. So there are many ways of eating food. So that physical glutton is one who wants a wide variety of food. So Sri Ramakrishna was a sort of spiritual glutton. He was not satisfied with a particular sadhana. So Holy Mother said he didn't practice religion to show the harmony between all religions. That was a byproduct of what he did. But his main intention or his main sadhana, as Holy Mother says, Sri Sharda Devi, was to see how other people experience religion, how other people, other castes, other nationalities, other religions, other followers of other sects within one religion. So how different is their approach? That interested him, because here Sri Ramakrishna had no other interest in life except to do sadhana. So his case is different. But we need to stick to one particular path, though we accept everything as true, as Sri Ramakrishna is to, Swami Vivekananda is to say, be broad as the sky, but be as deep as the ocean. So you have to combine apparently contradictory things. If you become extensive, if you become very liberal, then the people who follow you will not be fanatic or will not be, you may say, dedicated to their own ideal. They may just be taking up a one idea for novelty, then going to a personal God, then going to Advaita, then going to Bhagavata, and then keep on traveling the entire gamut of spiritual literature or experiences. And finally, they will find that they are reaching nowhere because they don't have that multi tasking skills that they can do, or they don't have that that skill to practice all sadhana. That is why Sri Ramakrishna says that you don't be very Catholic, otherwise you can't make progress. So abhyasa here means constant repetition of a few things which you accepted as truth, not constantly getting updated about new things and then not focusing on a particular object of concentration. That's why he says, in order to achieve this intense concentration, then we must be calm and purify our minds, because it is impurity, it is too much of thoughts, evil thoughts, too much of bad samskaras that disturb, and purification is only to make the mind calm. So Patanjali in the next sutra will tell us how to do this, how to purify our minds, how to attain concentration. He will be prescribing a mental attitude we should all take towards our co-travelers on our path. It may be people belonging to our own satsang, but at least in a broad way, the entire human population can be covered. There is no end to, or no fixed scope. It is an unlimited scope that we have. And Patanjali shows it in the next verses how to do it. What is this? Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekshanam, Sukha Dukha, Punya Punya, Vishayanam, Bhavanatas Chitta Prasadanam. So the meaning of this verse I will read, and then we will take up some question answers. Third verse says, Maitri Karuna, undisturbed calmness of mind is attained by cultivating friendliness towards the happy. Maitri Karuna. Karunam uditopekshanam. For those, one can oneself attain undisturbed calmness of mind is by how we do it? Friendliness towards the happy, those who are happy, compassion for the unhappy. See, we come across the people, different kinds of people. One is a happy category of happy people and unhappy people. That is one classification. And then there is virtuous people and the wicked people. So we have to come in contact with any of these four categories. If one may be happy, but one has normally one is happy if one is good. One happy can be unhappy. That is only when tamas predominates and you are doing some evil. You are not doing the right thing. So if we want undisturbed calmness of mind, then we have to see how that will happen. That will happen by cultivating friendliness towards the happy, compassion for the unhappy. If somebody is unhappy, you just have compassion. You can't feel happy or express your happiness to him. It is not possible because he himself is suffering. So if one is unhappy, then if we show some kind of compassion, it will move him and then it will remove his unhappiness. Delight in the virtuous. When somebody is doing some good thing and is slowly developing his character, one should not fail to appreciate. One should be happy, delight. One should be delighted. One should try to celebrate others' success. If they are virtuous, if they have displayed some extraordinary sacrificing qualities, then you have to praise them. So uh, we should not envy or be jealous of somebody else's success. If we see anybody who is truly happy in the real sense of the term, and if we come across unhappy people, we show some kind of compassion and treat them like that instead of uh, criticizing them. And finally, indifference towards the wicked. So when we will come across the categories: happy people, unhappy people, or the wicked people, or the virtuous. So four categories: virtuous people. So we have to delight in the virtuous and be indifferent towards the wicked. We should not hate. Otherwise, a new samskara is created. You just tolerate, you just be indifferent to people who are wicked. But you have to express your delight, you have to celebrate people who are virtuous, who are happy. Otherwise, you lose your happiness and you give your, importance to these wicked people instead of having an indifference. So that drains away. If we try to resist every time we come across wicked people, there is some kind of there is some kind of reaction. To prevent that, Swamiji says indifference. If you have indifference, then your chitta will become prasada. That means your chitta will become happy. It will constantly feel happiness. If somebody is happy, unhappy, we have to feel sorry for him instead of despising or criticizing him. Otherwise, what will happen if we uh, uh, spread these things with joy instead of being compassionate, then we will take the misfortunes ourselves. That is the general rule. The virtue of others is apt to irritate us because we take it as a reflection. There's another side to it. When we see evil people, we think we are superior. So there's a problem of superiority complex. But on the other hand, if something goes wrong and uh, when we see too many virtuous people, we feel a bit nervous that then we see our shortcomings in their company. So we try to do more reflection and we feel uneasy. But if a person who is really trained according to Patanjali to have undisturbed calmness, then you see he might have practiced friendliness towards the happy. Whenever he see happy people, he also got happy. But normally people are so jealous. They don't like to see somebody, especially somebody with whom they have a quarrel, to be happy. They would be, in fact, rejoicing if there is some unhappiness in them. So Swamiji warns us. He says, don't do that. Instead of criticizing or any person who is in a depressive state, if you are compassionate towards him, as Buddha said, you will not only get a lot of positive karma, but it will give you peace of mind and enlightenment. So now we'll take up some questions. Yes. Do the faculty, yes. First question is, do the faculties of thinking, feeling and willing originate from Manomay Kosha or Vijnanamay Kosha? Yes, this is what I discussed last time. But anyway, thinking, feeling and willing originate, no, not necessarily Manomay Kosha. As I told you, Manomaya kosha just has the reflective or the reactionary or the reactive mind. So that is manas. So manas is one part of the brain. There is another part which is known as buddhi, which distinguishes, which discriminates, which helps you to take the right choice. Now this is a higher state of mind. So thinking, feeling, and willing, they originate from not only the manomaya koshas but also the vijnanamaya kosha, depending on what kind of thinking you do, what kind of feeling you feel, and what kind of willpower you use. This is not unknown to the cosmic mind. It's so that is why it is part of the manomaya kosha or vijnanamaya kosha, both. Next, meditation is more powerful than sleep with respect to rest in mind and body. The power needs to be maintained to carry on life. Spirituality joint, that is our goal. Is it okay? Yes, that is what Swamiji also said, that the more you meditate, the less you need to sleep. If you want to uh, do away with too much of excess sleep, which is not also good, then one has to do a little japa, fixed time. If one gets concentration of mind, then the quality of the existing sleep will increase. It will be better, and further disturbance will not be created. Normally, it is created because we use our reactive mind more, not the discriminative mind. The more we start using our discriminative mind, then we can, through meditation, then we can lead our life, and then we will not be disturbed by less sleep or something like, because we have meditated, our mind has become fresh, it has got rest even while it is conscious. But sometimes when you don't do it, you feel really sleepy. That is the body's mechanism to make you cut off from the sense world. If you are not willing to cut off, then Prakriti says, no, I want to put you to sleep. I can't allow you to simply break my rules and just have your way and enjoy the sense organs unlimited way. No, someday or the other exhaustion will come. Maybe you can enjoy for 24 hours and then even more non-stop, but then somehow fatigue will catch hold of you. So that is nature's mechanism, mother's mechanism, as it is said in the Raj Yoga, to take you away from the gross and take you towards the spirit. That is what the mother wants to do, Prakriti wants to do. But we are going towards the gross. Prakriti pulls us and says, no, no, no. Maybe it deprives us of certain things, and then you get vairagya, and then you go to the change your attitude and go to the higher plane. So next is from Sao Paulo. Yes, always we are always listening about samskaras of the past lives, but when was our first life? Okay, that we don't. And that one that unites the qualities that could start producing samskara. No, samskaras did not start with a particular point of time. It is inherited. It is, as I said, the whole life is cyclic. So there's no question of asking which is the starting point. See, this is the problem with Semitic religions. For them, life is linear. It moves in a linear motion. There is only one life. Why? They say after you die, either you will go to hell or you go to heaven. Eternal damnation or eternal heaven. But there is no concept of rebirth. So that causes a lot of problem, and that is why perhaps you have asked that uh, what is that? Samskaras, when do they start? They don't start at a particular point. They are cyclical. Whereas in India we believe that all these samskaras, they are carried over to the next birth. They might have come from the previous birth, but you are adding some more samskaras every time. And life is not in a linear motion. So when did it first begin is not relevant at all. It will all go in cycles. Maybe the cycles are very long. We may not live. We will be living in some other form. We will be continuing to multiply the species in some other form because of rebirth. So the same body is not born again. So the samskaras, they are carried over to the next life, as I said. So that is the most logical explanation. So you cannot ask when did this samskaras originate. It cannot be answered because it's a cyclic thing. If I say it originated, say, 5 lives before that there was a life, or even if there was no life, it was waiting to be born. The soul was waiting to be born. It was born, it died again it was born, it died again. So these things have happened cyclically. There is no linear motion as in the case of uh, Semitic religions, the faith of Semitic religions. That is why you have to remember ki the most scientific way is to explain this karma through cyclical existence. Now, emotions have both source in chitta and buddhi. Yes, they don't have source. In the chitta, your emotions are stored in the form of samskaras. Too many fear emotions. They will be attached to certain. Suppose you have a fear of water. So every time you went to see the water, or somebody just asked you to go a little inside, then you will had that fear of water. So the emotion has been recorded and they live in the subtle body, they live in the chitta as samskaras. And as I told you, when the right time comes, they manifest. So one has to go to the root and solve it. That's the idea. So emotions can be in buddhi, that is the answer. Now, as a daily practical level, how can one develop compassion and eventual indifference to the unhappy, angry people? Most time, self-control is difficult. It is difficult. That is why spiritual life should be taken as a challenge. What is difficult? Everything is difficult. People to earn money also is difficult. And after earning money, to retain that money and save that money is difficult. After saving the money, utilizing it, people will just hold on, keep on hoarding money, and the whole life will spent be will not will be spent in something else, and that money will not be used. So to use the money also or use something which you possess is difficult. Leave alone practicing self-control. It was difficult in the past, it is difficult now, it will be difficult in the future. Because as long as we don't surrender our ego to God, and unless we do japa with sincerity, this self-control can become difficult. So I take your leave. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.